Hi everyone, I'm Chris from Simply Classic. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to take some inspiration and creativity to make something our own, and we're going to do a full pattern tutorial. So we have a lot of exciting things planned for you today. So we're going to use a textile that is new, and actually it's not new, it's probably the oldest textile, or at least one of the oldest textiles known to man, but it's new to this channel, and that is hair on hide. So I'm intrigued by it. I think I see these hides online and they're just beautiful. I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. I've always been wanting to try to use them, but I didn't want to spend $200 or $300 on hide. So first thing we do is look at some inspiration, because that's what I did. When I decided I wanted to dive into this, I said, well, let me look online and see what I can find. So let's look at these photos. So this first photo is a typical hair on hide bag that you're going to find online when you do a search, and that is with the fringe. It's a very Western looking bag. It's got the little X's there on the seams, and it's really a beautiful bag, but it really wasn't the look I was going for. I wanted to take that and move it into a more professional woman's bag. So I started searching some more. And I saw a lot of bags like this. Now this is, you'll see a bag where the leather's on the side, and you see that in the vertical going up and down, vertical going up and down, you see that's where the hair on hide is. And I'm going to flip through a couple of photos here, and you're going to see I found a lot of them with just a strip of that leather going either vertically or horizontally, and then mixing it with another product. And in this case, it was either leather or faux leather. And I like that. I like that it broke it up a little bit, and I think it toned it down, and it wasn't so much in your face Western kind of look. So I thought, well, I think that's kind of what I want to go for. So another photo I found was this one right here, and I don't know that this is genuine hair on hide leather. I think it might be a faux, just because it looks a little slouchy, but it is one-sided. And I thought, well, that's a really good idea. I like that. I like that of course, the handle's leather. I don't think you'd want to make your handles out of a hair on hide. I think you'd end up with hair all over you. So of course your handle, you want to be a different product, but I like the fact that the back of this was either leather or faux leather, and the front was the hair on hide. And I thought, well, that's a great way to break it up and not make it so overwhelming. So I really like that. Now, this one right here, I thought was really pretty. It definitely gives a nod to the Western look, but I think if you take that medallion off, it wouldn't be quite so Western. And I like that they did something different with the accent fabric, or the accent textile. They didn't just put it vertically or horizontally. They did something different. They did that middle section there. So I thought that was really a pretty one. This next one I'm going to and that one there is by Rock and Bee Designs. Now this next one I want to show you, it gives a little bit of nod to Western, I think, with the handle, with the beading or whatever that is there on the strap. But I'm going to zoom in and give you a close-up of this. Look at how they stitched on top of the hair. I didn't particularly like that. So I wanted to find a solution so that I didn't do that. I just think it kind of takes away from it some. And if you're going to do that, I think you're going to go back to the first bag we looked at with the crisscrosses on the seams to hold it together, so that it's obviously, and it's kind of a leather attachment rather than just the thread on top of the hair. So I knew I did not want to do that. This here, you know, I'm tote bag girl. I've told you all that like 100 times, but this is a gorgeous bag. Look at this. And see, this is kind of what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was, it caught your eye, oh, that's a gorgeous bag, but it wasn't so Western. It was very classy. Now, I think that the rivets do add a Western feel to it, but the way you have that leather going up the middle, and then you can see how the top of the bag is it kind of comes to a V. It's almost like it's crisscrossed there. I'm not really sure how they did that, but that is really pretty. I like this one. And then this last one I want to show you, it's a bag by HBG by Azaria, and I really like this bag too. And look at how they dealt with the top stitching on this bag. They actually took a piece of leather or faux leather on the top and they just folded it over, kind of like the way I do my interior slip pockets, and they just stitched on that so that your top stitching is not on top of the hair. It's actually on top of a piece of leather that is on top of the hair. So, so anyway, those are some inspiration photos, and that's typically what I do when I look at something new, is I go through photos and see what I like and what catches my eye, what I don't like, and then kind of make my decision based on that. So I want to put the camera down for a second and just talk to you a little bit about hair on hide fabrics. So this here is a faux hair on hide. So this is a faux fur. And I got this in New York City years ago. And it is, I mean, it is gorgeous. So, but this is not necessarily, I don't want to say you can't make a bag out of this, but I don't know that I would make a bag out of this. I think that this is more of something you're going to make a jacket or a vest or something like that out of. When you cut this, you want to be very careful. You don't just take your scissors and you don't just cut the fabric. You don't just cut it like you would normally cut fabric. If you do, you're going to end up cutting all this hair, and your edge is going to look like you put a bowl on top of your head and cut around it. It's not going to look right. So when you cut it, you want to, and I'm just going to tell you this in case you do use a hair that's a little bit longer, you want to take and cut it from the back. And when you cut it, you're just going to barely put your scissors like right underneath, and you're going to cut like that. Okay. So I'm just going to come down here and cut a little piece off. So you see how you don't really see the side or the end here, right? It kind of folds over. So if I take this and I just stick my scissors underneath here and just cut like this, then you just kind of pull this apart, not too much of the hair comes off, and then you can see, you don't even have to finish the seam. It kind of just falls over on itself, okay? So when you're using this longer kind of fabric, or either it's faux or real, it is more of a high end. It's usually used more for clothing, and if you cut it right, it won't quite be so messy. But that's not what we're using. What we're going to use is this hide right here. Now, I got this hide from Uncle George's Leather. He has a Facebook group, and he had these hides, I think they're goat hides, and he had them for $20 a piece. So I thought, well, that's great. I think I'm going to do that because I don't want to spend, again, $200 or $300 on a huge cow hide. So I bought two hides, just $20 a piece, and this is the hide we're going to use today. Okay, I'm going to just put you out a little bit and hold it up so you can see about how big it is. And again, it's a goat hide, and this is it here. Okay. So it's not huge. Obviously goats aren't huge, but it's got obviously a very short hair, just like a cow would have. Cows, goats, deer all have short hair. I'm gonna try to bring it a little closer so you can see. So I really can't, there's not a lot to it. I mean, it is definitely hair on there, but it's not something you can push the hair out of the way and cut in between. So, huge disclaimer here. This is messy. You want to have your vacuum close by because you're going to need it. So, once I decided what bag I was going to use or what pattern I was going to use, I tested the pattern out first, and I did not use heron hide. I used cork. So first let's go over the pattern that we're going to do today. We're going to do, and I hope I'm saying this right, the Marichel Hobo, and this is by RLR Creations. This bag goes together differently than any other bag I've done, and I don't think there's a tutorial out there on it, so I'm going to go ahead and do the whole bag for you. And of course, we are going to have to make some changes because we're using a textile that is not a textile that's necessarily common with this sort of bag, although I think the hobo style, and the reason why I chose it is because of the fact that she does have some accent panels on this, and I like that. Mid-size bag, I mean, it's not too terribly big, but I thought it would be a really pretty heron hide bag. So the first thing I did, I made it in cork, and I'm going to show you. So this is the cork version that I did. Okay, so the reason why I did this, I made this exactly, well, except for the straps, and we're going to make the straps just like this because I didn't have swivel clips big enough to go in here, but I made it exactly like the pattern said. I want to make sure I had the pattern down. I want to make sure I felt like the pattern would work with the heron hide before I just dove into cutting the heron hide. Now this bag has a really cool panel at the bottom. You see that? And the panel kind of comes up on the side. Okay, that's a really neat design. I really like the accents here on the side to hold the strap on. And then on the inside, she calls for a slip pocket and a zipper pocket, which I did. I did both of those. You see the slip pocket there, excuse me, the zipper pocket there. And then she has a pattern piece for, and I have it stuffed, but she has a pattern piece for the slip pocket that actually fits along the entire side of the bag. This pattern is really written well. It is a very, very good pattern. So I'm going to link it down below. Go ahead and grab a copy and make it up in something other than heron hide first. Okay. So then my second bag is a heron hide bag. And what I did on this bag is this accent panel, of course, is just like it is in the pattern, no different. I did add a faux leather accent up here at the top because when I top stitched this on, I did not want to top stitch on top of the hair like we talked about. Even though it is a short hair hide, on the seams, the hair doesn't stick up too much. You see here, it sticks up a little bit, and that's just part of having a heron hide bag. Okay, I think that looks really neat. I think you can see that. And then you'll see, even though you have to cut this straight across at the bottom, your hair is going to, you know, the extra little hairs will kind of go over the accent piece a little bit. That's just the look of the heron hide. And honestly, I like this. I think it came out really good. It actually came out better than I thought for my first try with heron hide. So we're going to go over, like I said, the pattern changes and what you need to do to make it. And we're going to make it out of black and white. We're going to use black accents, of course, instead of brown. And we'll see how it comes out. So we're going to start out by, I'm going to go over all the pieces. I'm going to go over what you need to cut in addition to, and what you need to cut a little bit differently. There's a few, like this main piece here, we're going to cut a little bit differently. And then we're going to kind of go from there. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our pieces. Okay, so I have my hide laid out here on my cutting mat. Now my cutting mat is 55 inches long by 32 inches wide. This hide is just about the right, or just about the same width, about 32 inches, and it's about 41 inches long. Now hides are done in square inches, And this one is not marked. They're usually marked when you buy hides on the back as to how many, you know, how big the hide is. And so if you're going to, like if you have a pattern that you want to convert to the hide, you have to get it down to square inches and multiply it out, and you have to kind of go through the math. But in this case, we only have 2 pieces that we're going to be cutting out. Now, I am making the everyday size. There's 2 sizes in this pattern, the everyday size and then the large size, like a medium and a large. So what I did was I printed the pattern pieces out twice, taped them together so that I had one full pattern piece. And I think that's important when you do this, because you can't, I mean, I guess you could theoretically, you know, crease this, but you really don't want to do that. Okay, now the hair goes in one obvious direction. So this is the top of the hide, and like if this was a dog, you would pet this way, you wouldn't pet this way, right? So you want to make sure that your top of your pattern piece is going at the top of the hair, or what would be the top of the bag. Okay. Now, I can put this anywhere on this hide. I don't have to put it in the middle. If I decide that I want, that's one good thing about leather, it doesn't have grain. So if I decided I wanted to have it over here, if I like the pattern of this over here, that's what I would do. I could do it this way. I really, because it's hair on hide, you don't want to turn your pattern pieces, but you could do that on regular leather. So I know I definitely want my pattern piece to go in this direction, and then it's just a matter of where on this hide do I want that to go. Now, we are not going to bring this hide all the way down to the bottom of the bag. So what I did was I folded this. You can see on this pattern piece, she has it marked right here. This is where the overlay starts, and you'll see a line, it kind of goes like that. So you kind of know where your overlay is going to go. So what I did was I folded the bottom up so that it was well within the overlay, and then I also went ahead and folded each side in like this. Now we do want to cut the top, and then we're going to end up putting an overlay on that and cutting it away, but it's not a lot. We're only going to cut that just a very small, maybe 2 inches. But there's no reason to have to go through and try to cut all of these angles and all that, if we're just going to cut it off. So I'm going to fold my pattern piece, and I'm going to figure out exactly where I want this to lay. Now I kind of like you can kind of see this stripe going down where the, you know, where the spine was. I like that. I want that to be in the middle, but I also kind of like this spotting up here. So I'm probably going to do one side with this a little closer to the top so I get more of that black in, and then I'm going to do the other side with it closer to the bottom. Now you have to look at your leather, because like in this case, there are some markings on here. I don't think you can see that, where the leather, you know, the fur isn't there. And let me tell you, I used to have, being on a farm, I had horses and mules and all that kind of good, cows and everything. And I mean, sometimes that happens, you know, the animals get bruised or they beat up on each other or whatever they do, and they get scars. And so that may very well be for something like that. Okay, so we're going to place this down, figure out where you want it. Now I know where the middle is because I have that on the fold, right? Or I have the fold line here. So I'm going to make sure I place the middle of this right on that line. And I'm going to put something on here to hold this down, and then I'm just going to use my scissors to cut this. Now, I'm not going to use my best favorite pair of scissors, I will tell you that. I'm probably going to just use kind of an older pair. And again, disclaimer, this is very messy. So I'm going to pull you in a little bit closer just so you can kind of see. And I mean, I'm just going to cut this just like you normally would cut. Like you would normally cut fabric. Now, before we get going, it is a stiffer piece of hide. And I will tell you that it is about about 1.5 ounces, but it's stiff. So the edges where we sew the two together, we're going to use the Charfix leather skiver on the sides, which will be up this side and over here up this side, but we'll get to that. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of hold this straight and then cut this. And down here does not have to be perfect because we're just going to end up cutting it away. Okay. Move this out of the way, and you can see all the hair on the table. I mean, that's just kind of part of it. Okay, cut my other side. Now I'm going to keep this piece because I could probably maybe use it as an accent in a pouch or something. Okay. I'm going to take this, and I have my trash over here, so I'm just going to kind of put it in the trash. And take this, put this in over the trash, get all that off. And then of course you can see on the table how much hair we have. Okay, and then I just kind of brush this to get all the hair off. And isn't that just by itself, that's a very unique look, isn't it? Okay, so now we're going to cut the other side the same way, and this side, obviously I'm not going to have that black part, I'm going to have it a little bit further down. All right, so this is going to be the other side. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so there are our two sides. So I still have all this left over, and that's all we need of the hair on hide for this bag. And so you'll see you still have enough left over. You could do another bag with it. You could do some pouches with it. You could do whatever. And, you know, for $20 a hide, it was, I think, a great deal. Excellent deal. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up, and then I'll be back and we'll go over the next pattern pieces. Okay, let's talk about our pattern pieces. So of course we have our two main hide pieces, which we've cut out already. I'll set those to the side. I have I was going to use some real leather for the accents, and the only real leather I have is a deer skin, which is very, very, very lightweight, a little stretchy. So I decided not to use that, and instead I'm going to use this faux leather from Bo-dee. So I cut my handle, and my handle is 4 inches by 18 inches, which is a little bit different than the pattern. You're going to need 2 connector pieces for your handles, and these are 1 1/4 by 5, and there's no kind of interface or anything on those. Then you're going to need your 2 accent panels, and these are going to be the bottom of the bag. I went ahead and put some Decoville Light on the back of both of these and kept it out of the seam allowance, and she actually gives you a pattern piece for that, the pattern piece for the Decoville. So go ahead and use it. Now, she suggests using some fleece in this bag, which is probably a good idea if you want it to be kind of a hobo slouchy bag. You don't want to use Decoville Light. You're going to want to use some fleece. We have our bottom panel, and that has some Decoville Heavy on it. We have our 2 bottom panel side pieces, and these are fused with Decoville Light, and she gives you a pattern piece for this as well. We have our strap connector pieces. Now, here's how I did this on the strap connectors. I cut 2 pieces exactly as they should be cut. She also gives you a pattern piece for the Decoville Light. I went ahead and cut those out exactly as they should be cut, and I fused them on the back. You're going to put this on the other piece, and then you're going to sew around, and then you're going to go ahead and cut it. And when you cut it, you're going to cut a little bit of the main piece, because the way the pattern is you put these pieces wrong sides together and then you flip them out. So by not doing that, you don't have to worry about a seam allowance, or you don't have a seam allowance. So when you put this on and you sew around, you can actually, instead of sewing 1/8 of an inch away, sew 1/4 of an inch away. And then when you cut a little bit of both pieces off. And then when you go to edge coat, it's going to be nice and smooth and easy to do. So again, I've got my two connectors I cut exactly right, and then I have 2 just scrap pieces that I'm going to spray adhesive and then get those on. Your grommets eventually are going to go on here. So you do want to use some Decoville Light on these pieces. We have our interior zipper panel. Now, these 2 pieces are not in the pattern. These are extra pieces. And this is the zipper facing for the top of the bag, because as we talked about before, I do not want to have any thread stitching, top stitching on my hair. So the way I got this piece is I cut an extra main panel. And if you can see the way that these are put together, you have to tape it right here. So I just took these 2 top pieces. I didn't worry about putting the bottom on. Okay, so I cut 2 extra. Just printed out extra pattern pieces and cut them. So essentially what I had were just these 2 upper main panels. Then what I did was I folded them in half, and I took, and so now again, pretend this is gone. I took a ruler or a measuring tape, and I measured, and I think they're 2 inches down. Actually, it's 1.5 inches. So you're going to measure 1.5 inches down, and you're going to make just little dotted lines all the way. And then you're just going to cut it, and you're going to end up with a piece that looks like this. And you can see that was a pattern piece. So I just folded it in half, cut it off. So now I know that the top shape is exactly the same as my main piece, so that when I go to put this on, it's going to match up exactly right. Okay, now when you cut these pieces, you do want to try to go ahead and use a rotary cutter for these. Just go kind of slow, and because if you use scissors, you're going to get kind of the choppy look, and you don't want that. Now, before I sew any of this on, for both these top pieces and also the bottom accent pieces, because this has a gray backing, I'm going to put some edge coat on these pieces and maybe just a tad bit on the back just to kind of hide it, and then it'll all blend in. I'm going to burn my edges first because I can see some little threads coming up, and then I'll edge coat, and that'll be on these pieces here, these two pieces here, and then once I get my strap connectors done, I'm going to do the same thing for those. Okay, so those are the exterior pieces. For the lining, you have your bottom panel, and this has woven fuse too. This is just a cotton that I'm using, so I put woven fuse on the back of all of these. So you have your same bottom panel, you have your same two side pieces, you have two pieces of interior lining, which is the same pattern piece as your main piece. And again, I have some Decoville light on this, which I'm going to trim up before I cut, or before I sew it, just trim up the edges here. Then you have a pocket piece. Now the pocket piece, this is your slip pocket, says to cut two, and then you're going to sew them together at the top. What I did was I took my pattern piece and I put it on the fold so that I had one large piece. Then I put some some woven fuse too on the back of half of it, and then folded this down, put it back in my steam press, and pressed it down really well. So now all I'm going to have to do is top stitch this, and then I'll be able to connect it right to the bottom of the bag and do my divider pockets. Okay, that's just a little shortcut. And then you have a piece for your interior zipper pocket. Okay. And those are all the pieces. Just place it on a piece of scrap and sew around up the side, across the top, and down the other side. Be sure to back stitch. Do not sew across this bottom side. Because we're not sewing it wrong sides together and turning it out and then top stitching, you can actually sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to trim the edges so that they're all nice and even, and then we'll edge coat them. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Do the other one the same way. Okay, so now I'm going to trim this up. I just have, this is just a little bit of oil on here from my machine. So I'm going to trim this so that the bottom edges match. I'm going to trim this seam allowance down to about 1/8. Okay. So now all my edges are nice and smooth. It'd be easier to edge coat. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edge coat these and set them to dry, and then we're going to go on to the next step while they're drying. I skived these edges, and I have to tell you, I accidentally deleted the video of me skiving the edges, so I am sorry. But if your leather needs it, you need to go ahead and skive the edges. I will make sure that next time I do a leather bag that I do not delete the video of me skiving. So I apologize again for that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our overlays and put them on the bags. Now I did edge coat the edges that are going to show. So that's the bottom of the top piece, and that is the top of the bottom piece. Those are the two edges that are going to show. I also marked on the back of the main panel exactly where the overlay needs to go, the bottom overlay. The top overlay is going to be even with the top of the bag. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clip on this top one. Now you can use double-sided tape. I did find that it does stick, but it's obviously not the easiest thing to use with the hair on hide. But if you need to use it, you can do that to hold it in place. And I am going to use just a little bit of it down here at the bottom in the middle because I can't clip that. So I'm going to take just a little bit here. Stick this on. Peel off that back. And I'm going to line my edges up. Let me get this other piece out of the way here. I want to line my edges up with my markings on the back. And we're going to top stitch this on at 1/8 inch seam allowance. So let me just So we're going to top stitch the top of the bottom in the bottom of the top. And clip it. So here we go. So now what we want to do is flip it over and go ahead and cut away the extra that we have at the top here and the little bit that we have at the bottom. So have your trash can ready because it's going to be messy, and you just want to leave, this does not have to be exact, just make sure when you cut it you don't cut your bottom piece here. But you just want to cut some of this away. So there's the front panel. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And there we have our two pieces, front and back. Okay, we're going to move on to the next step. So we're going to work on our handle next, our strap. So I cut mine different than what the pattern called for. I cut mine 4 by 18 and drew a line down the middle, and I'm going to put some double-sided tape, but I'm only going to put it in the middle section. So probably starting about 4 inches from each side. You don't want to put it all the way to the end if you're going to do a handle like what I'm doing. If you're going to do a handle like what's in the pattern, then obviously follow the pattern instructions. But I do not have any swivel clasps that will fit in my grommets, so that's the reason why I'm doing this a little bit different. And it's going to be like what I showed you in the beginning of the video. So you're going to do the normal thing here where you're going to fold it into the center. You're just not going to have any double-sided tape down here at the ends. So you can put a few clips to hold that. And then we're going to fold this in half, and we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch down each end, just like a normal strap. And if you're off a little bit on the ends here, you just go ahead and even that out. That one's good. So I'm going to go ahead and edge coat the ends here and here. I'm going to singe the threads here, and then we will move on to the next step. Now this here is an extra piece as well. These are our strap connectors that I'm going to be using instead of the swivel clasps. So they're 1.25 inches wide, if you recall, and so I just put some double-sided tape. I'm going to take that off, fold the edges to the center, and I'm going to top stitch these. We will use these when we get ready to put our strap on. So the next thing we're going to do is get our bottom pieces. So that's the straight bottom piece and our 2 little triangles here. We're going to go ahead and put them right sides together. We're going to stitch. Then we're going to open up the seam allowance and top stitch. So there's our bottom piece. All right, so now we need to work on the lining because we're going to put our zipper in and top stitch before we sew the rest of the bag together. I told you this bag comes together a little bit different, and I really like the way it does. So I'm going to get the pieces for my lining and we'll get started on that. Okay, so for the lining we have the same pieces that we just sewed. We have our bottom piece and we have our 2 triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sewing that. So there's our bottom. Put that aside for just a second. Now we have our slip pocket. Now the slip pocket piece is exactly the same width as the lining. Okay, now I'm just gonna see my woven fuse is kind of sticking out here. I'm gonna cut that and then I'm gonna go ahead and cut my triangles out of the woven fuse. You certainly could have done that while you were cutting out the piece. That is not a problem. I just hadn't done it yet, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it now. Okay. Now in the pattern she has you put your zipper pocket on the same side as the slip pocket, which is great. You can certainly do that. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the opposite side. So what I'm gonna do from here is put this pocket piece on here. Some clips. We're going to baste it in place, but I'm also going to go ahead and draw a line so I can divide it. And I'm going to do all that at one time. So I'm going to fold it in half. Go ahead and mark my halves here, my centers. And then I'm just going to use my ruler to draw a line down the center here, which I need to get my ruler. Okay. Just going to go ahead and mark that. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want here with pockets. If you want to put, maybe do it in thirds, you could certainly do that. I think I'm just going to leave mine in half, though. And cut the thread in between my triangles. And I'm going to go ahead and put, I always try to put a rivet here just to reinforce pockets. So I'm going to go ahead and put a rivet there. So now on the other lining piece, I'm going to go ahead and put my zipper pocket on here. Now, she has you take your large zipper pocket and stitch a box on, pull it through, and then use your bottom half and pull it up to the top, and then go ahead and stitch around. I'm going to do it the way I typically do it, which is to use a piece of the faux leather stitch that on, cut around it. I'm going to cut this piece in two and then stitch it. I think as the more we sew, we find that there's certain things we like to do a certain way, if that's fair to say. We kind of have our favorites. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put some double-sided tape on here. To hold it in place as I sew it. Oops. I swear, I have the dropsies in my sewing room. I don't know if y'all do, but wow. Nowhere else in my life except for in my sewing room. Okay, so I'm gonna put this, let's see how far down. Well, let me mark my centers first. It's always a good thing to do. Now from that center point, I'm going to come down 1.5 inches and go ahead and put this on. So if you want to do your interior zipper pocket that way, this way I should say, I would suggest 1.5 inches from it's essentially from the lowest point in this curve. Just mark your center and then go ahead and stitch it or lay it down. Okay, so I'm moving all over the place here. Let's see if I can manage to do this. And then of course center your zipper. Let me see where my center is. There. Okay. Look at it, make sure it looks straight, which it does. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this on. Okay, so now we're just going to grab this and cut in the middle. And we're going to cut all the way to the edge. Now go put your scissors underneath your overlay and just snip beyond the edge. Okay? Then you're going to fold this or turn this over and cut up, and then go ahead and trim this off. Now, this does not need to be pretty or neat. Just as long as you don't cut your zipper overlay, you are good to go here. And you can't see the lining on the right side when you turn this over. So don't be super particular about it, just cut it away, no big deal. Okay, now you can see how messy that is, right? No big deal, because this is what we care about right there. See how pretty that is? All right, so now what I'm going to do is take my pocket And I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to cut it in half. Now, this is if you're doing the pocket the way I'm doing it. If not, if you're going to follow the pattern, you're actually going to be using this piece as the back facing in the pocket all together. Okay. So now I'm going to sew the zipper right side of the fabric, right side of the line to the wrong side of the zipper. We're going to go ahead and baste that on. And then from here, I push this up, fold the seam allowance down, and top stitch that. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other side. So now with our zipper going to the left, we're going to lay this on top Now I have some double-sided tape on here. When I pulled the lining away and cut it, my double-sided tape showed from when I put the overlay on, so I don't need to put any more on there. Now make sure your pocket's open. This can be centered a little bit better. Okay, and with your pocket open, you want to go ahead and stitch now around the inside of this overlay. I'm going to go ahead and singe, and then I'm going to close my pocket. Now, we do not want to close the pocket all the way. And you are going to have some left over because we cut this piece in half. You should have roughly an inch, and that's okay. Just cut that off. So we're going to sew down the sides here to close our pocket. But we're going to leave the bottom open. And you can certainly press this here. It'll make it a little easier to, since it's cotton, I can do that. I can go press it with my iron to make sure that when I'm ready to close this, it makes it a little easier to do. Okay, so there we go. All right, so now let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we have our two main pieces here. and we have our 2 lining pieces. So what I want to do is to take our little triangles here, and I'm just going to fold it, and I'm going to stitch up and close them. Now I'm taking a generous 1/2 inch seam allowance on the lining, and I'm just, this is what it looks like. You're just sewing a straight line all the way up. Cut that, and what it does is forms a little pleat there. Okay, so I'm going to do that with the other side. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the main pieces, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to go ahead and fold them, and you're going to stitch. Now here you want to do a not so generous 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay? Just be a little bit smaller with it. What do I have going? There we go. Okay. And you do want to back stitch the beginning and the end. And see when it pops out, that's what it's going to look like. It is a very pretty design. I really like this. So there we go. Okay, so next we're going to work on putting in our zipper. So you want to take your zipper for the top of the bag and just go ahead and cut it in two, or not cut it in two, open it up. You want to find your center, put a little snip, and we're going to take, we're going to find the center here. Okay, put a little snip. Okay, so we're going to take our zipper, we're going to put it obviously right side down, and you're going to put it on here. Now, you can go ahead and make little slits in this curve, but if you do, don't make them too deep because we don't want them to show, obviously, when we turn this around. I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of double-sided tape on here. I found that it helps. I normally don't when I put zippers in like this on the top of the bag, but I did find that it helped on this one. So I'm just going to use my 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape just to kind of help hold it in place. So I'm going to line up the centers. And you just want to curve it around. Okay. just like that. So see, the zipper is almost gonna, the teeth are gonna stick up a little bit. I don't know if you can tell, but that's okay because you have this curve here and you have a smaller, shorter edge here than you do here. So therefore it's going to do that. It's gonna want to flip up. Now, you can do a couple things. You can go ahead and put more double-sided tape and put a piece of lining down, or you can base this on. I'll tell you, this double-sided tape is holding really well. I know I said don't do this, but I think it's gonna work. So let me go ahead and put some more double-sided tape down on here. See if I can't do this in one fell swoop. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Might regret it, I don't know. Okay, so this is gonna be the front of my bag, so I'm gonna use my slip pocket piece. And I'm going to line up the centers and then just go ahead and make sure all of my edges match here. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and stitch this on. Fourth of an inch. All right. I think that might have worked. Go ahead and flip it around. It did. Very good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Look at my zipper. Don't freak out when your zipper looks like this. It's okay. It's going to get better. When I first did this pattern, I was like, oh, my zipper's so wavy, but it's not going to be wavy when you're done. Okay? So it's okay. It is okay. All right, so got that part done. Let's go ahead and we're going to do the other side exactly the same way. Now, I probably should have put some relief cuts in my other side. I'm going to put a few in here. This is not a huge seam allowance, so it's not the end of the world, but so you just put some little relief cuts in there. Okay, so we can turn this around and top stitch. So we have our two zippers on, and we have the bag top stitched. That's my favorite thing. We don't have to top stitch when it's done. Okay, so next what we're going to do is put our bottom piece on our main face here. So we're going to find the centers. And if you haven't found the center of your main panel yet, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to clip that together. Now, this is the most amazing thing to me. I love this part too. And this is just a well-written pattern. When you stitch this on, okay, you've got this curve here, right? We did that pleat. You're just going to kind of work that around the pleat. And it's easier if you push the pleat out, okay? Go ahead and work that around the pleat. And it's going to come right to the point here. Okay. So we're going to do the other side, push your pleat out. And it's going to come right to the point here. Okay. All right, so we're going to back stitch and we're going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, when you start sewing it, don't start, get this out of the way. You're not going to start at the very point. You're going to start a 1/2 inch in. So basically, here's a good way to look at it. Let's look at it on this side. You want to start where your decoville is. So we're going to sew on this side all the way up to this point, and then when we sew the other side, we're going to sew all the way up to that point, and it's going to come together beautifully. So, you know, don't start at the edge of your fabric is what I'm trying to say. And I'm actually going to sew from this side. It might be easier to see. So I'm actually going to put my needle in right there at that point. So on this side, when we get to the edge, we're going to stop sewing right at the point. Let's see if I can bring you in a little bit here. So I don't want to go past it. And then the back stitch. Okay. So you see I sewed just to the point here, and on this side I started right at the point. So we're going to take our other main piece and we're going to do the same thing. So see how, let's see if I can get my light on that. Right to the point on both sides. And same thing here. Get my threads cut. We started and stopped right at the point. Ingenious. I love the way this pattern comes together. Look at that. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing with the lining. So now, because we don't have Decoville here to help us know where the point is, you can certainly mark it. And I think I'm going to do that so that I don't over sew. Although of course it's not as important on the lining, but still we want it to look nice, right? So I'm going to just mark, and I'm going to do it 3/4 of an inch because I'm going to take a bigger lining. I'm just going to put a little dot, big dot. Okay, so what I did was I measured from this edge right here 3/4 of an inch down, and I just centered a dot right there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and that's how I'm going to know where to start and stop stitching. Now this is not in the pattern, but I do think that just from doing it a few times that it's going to help me be a little more accurate in sewing this lining piece on. Okay, so I'm going to sew this one in full, and then the next one I'm going to leave a section open. Now I'm going to leave an opening that is really wide. Really wide. Because now in the pattern she calls for a cotton for your main fabric, not hair on hide leather. So if that's the case, you should be able to pull it through the pocket, the zipper pocket, no problem. This is just a change that I need to make because of the material I'm using, the textile I'm using. Just a little change in the pattern. And we all have done it a bunch of times, pulling it through the bottom and then closing everything off through the pocket. Okay, so I'm going to pretty much leave an opening from these two bottom seams. I'm just going to stitch to the seam on each side, and I'm going to stop. Okay. So we are in the home stretch here. So now we need to close up the sides. So you're gonna have to pull the bag open like this. And go ahead and clip your sides. And you're not stitching over your zipper, okay? So see, and you're not stitching this little short edge right here. You're just going to stitch from your seam here that we just did all the way up, and you're going to back stitch up here. You can do that for both the lining and the main fabric, your front and back. Your main purse fabric. So you're going to, when you do this, you're going to start and stop. Okay, so on this side we have our dot, right, where we start and stopped. So when you fold this in like this, you're going to see that seam, that stitch right there. That's where you're going to stitch from, and then you're going to stitch all the way up to the top. You can do the same thing on your face fabric. You're going to, so here's my little dot here, here's my edge, and this is the stitch on the outside. I'm going to start from there, and I'm going to stitch all the way up, okay? So you're going to have to kind of fold this in. Now, one thing I am going to do before I do that, I'm going to cut my excess here off my lining. Overall, sewing with hair on hide is really not that different or difficult. It is messy, a little messy, but it's really not different than working with regular leather. You have to make the same concessions to the pattern as you would for regular leather, you know, due to thicknesses and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, you know, we added a facing at the top of the bag just so we didn't stitch on top of our hide. But other than that, it really has not been that difficult or that different, right? So if it's something you've been wanting to do, I would say try it. Go ahead and keep your eye out at Uncle George. He, like I said, periodically has some great deals. And I mean, well, he always has great deals, but he periodically has hair on hide. Or just kind of search around and see what you can find and give it a try. Makes for a stunning bag, there's no doubt. Okay, so we're going to start right there at our stitch. So let's see, let me see if I can fold this down so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to put my needle in right at that stitch. I'm going to pull you in. Okay, so right there at that stitch. So I'm stitching on the hide now, and you know, no different. Everything is same. Now it's a little a little thick, and it's okay. And trim it down over my trash. Hold on, you're not gonna see this. Trim it down over my trash so I can keep my mess to a minimum here. Okay, I'll do the other side. So we're gonna go right in that hole. And this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. All right, trim it over my trash. Okie doke. Get all this hair off. All right, now we're going to do the lining. Now, as I do this seam, I'm going to start at about a 3/4 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to taper it to a 1/2 inch seam allowance so that the top edge matches up easily with the top edge of the bag. Okay, I'm gonna trim this down. And one more, then we get to turn this out. Now, if you want to put a key fob in, now is the time. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and make a key fob real quick and stick it in because I like to put those in my bags. So I'm going to do that and I'll be back. Okay, so I sewed up my side seam, put my key fob in, sewed up my side seam. So now we are ready to pull this back through. So I'm just going to reach through the opening in my lining and I'm going to let this bag pull through. We'll see what it looks like. See how nice these corners line up? Look at that. It matches perfectly and everything lines up. It's fabulous. Fabulous. All right, I'm going to put this lining in, just make sure we're not super baggy here before I close up the... Yeah, that is good. That looks good. So that's with a 3/4 inch seam allowance on the lining. Okay, so what we're gonna do from here is open up our pocket, grab our lining, pull it through, and close it up, and then we'll close up the pocket. Okay, so here's what we have. I mean, this is just such an awesome pattern, y'all. Didn't it come together really neat? I love the way it did. Different than, I like the way you put the zipper on top stitch before you even finish the bag. To me, that is like the best. So make sure you go and buy this pattern because I think you're really gonna enjoy it. And again, this is the medium size or the smaller of the two. So I'm sure the larger is even, obviously it's even bigger, but I bet you it's even better. And especially me being a tote bag girl. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is put our zipper pull on. And of course we want our, when this is the right side, we want the bag to open this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the zipper pull on this side. Okay, so what we're going to do is we want to kind of flatten, stick your fingers in this little section over here and kind of pull it apart and flatten it as much as possible. Now, I've got zippers sticking out and overlays sticking out, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of trim all that off. Okay. So we're going to try to get this, kind of take this part and push it down some. And we want to just stitch across here to hold that closed, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And this side's a little trickier because this is where our zipper closes, but very doable. So I'm just going to cut that off. And I'm going to stitch that close. Okay, I'm going to move you over here. All right, I'm going to do this side first. And of course, you're not going to be able to see this. So, let me move the camera for you. Okay. So here we are. Getting these corners good to go. And you don't need to go crazy going back and forth and back and forth. The main thing we're trying to do here is hold these closed so that when we go to put our connectors on, it'll be, they'll be nice and even. Ooh, I almost lost my zipper pull there. So you might have to play with it a little bit. And again, you probably are not going to have to play with it quite as much if you're using a quilting cotton. But So you notice I kind of started in the middle of that because I didn't want to start at the end and have it push my zipper in the, you know, sometimes just the pressure of your presser foot will push it forward, and I did not want that to happen. So now I'm going to go back and just stitch from the end. All right. And again, this is not anything fancy, it's just to hold it closed. All right, let me get you out. Okay. There we go. I have to kind of train it here. Okay, so now we're going to get our strap ends ready, our connectors here, so that we can go ahead and put those on. So we're gonna have to put grommets in them. Use my Grommet Press to do that. And I will move the camera so I can show you how to do that. Okay, so we're here at my Grommet Press. This is a press from Rowley, R-O-W-L-E-Y, Rowley Company. They're a workroom supply company that I used to order a lot of things from when I was doing window treatments and duvets and bed skirts and all. And I did window treatments with grommets in them, and this thing came in handy. So it comes, it's just like a rivet press. It comes with all different cutting dies and pressing dies. You can do buttons with it, the big covered buttons, and you can do grommets. And anyway, works the same way. So what we want to do is take, and we're going to use, this is a number 6 grommet, and I want to put that, you want to put it at least 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of this. So what I'm going to do is just take this, and I'm going to kind of figure out where I want it, and I'm going to make sure it looks straight and all, and then just draw a circle. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. So now I'm going, this is my cutting die. I'm just going to stick my little cutting board on here, and I'm going to cut one out. Okay. So what I found the easiest thing to do to make sure they're even is then to take these two, line them up, and then just draw your second circle in, using the first circle as your, or the first cut as your template. Okay, now this is exactly the same size as the die, this circle here. So it's going to be easy to make sure you get it in exactly the right spot. And then I have my 2 holes cut. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put the grommet in. And I'm going to switch this out, put my press on, and then I'll show you how I press it in. Okay, so now I have the press part on. I've put the front of the grommet in, right? So this is what the front of the grommet looks like. Stick that in. This is what the back looks like. I'll line that up. And each grommet has its own press die, so it fits right in. You can kind of hear the way it clicks in. Okay, so it stays good and sturdy. And then you just take and press it down. And then just like that, you have a perfectly set grommet. voila, there we go. Oops, sorry, I nicked you and you're moving around. Okay, so now we want to take these and we're going to sew it on the bag. So I'm going to move you back over and we're going to do that. Okay, so if there's a tricky part to this, this is probably it. We want to, here, let me lift you up a little bit. Okay, so we want to take our edge connector here and we want to stick it on the bag. And then we're going to sew this on. Now, I've tried a couple different things. I've tried some to just sew it on like this. It likes to move a little bit. I've tried some double-sided tape. I've tried a couple things. And I think that the double-sided tape isn't a bad idea. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple of small pieces. The problem is that when you put the double-sided tape on, you take the tape off and try to stick it on, and it's hard to get on. So if there's a tricky part to this bag, this is probably it. It's not hard, it's just you got to work with it a little bit. Maybe just a little tricky. Okay. So I'm going to peel the back off the tape. Keep it opened up. And then go ahead and get it on there. And obviously you want to make sure it's as straight as possible and as even as possible. And then what you're going to do is sew this on. Now, I've been sewing 2 lines of stitching just to give it a little extra support. This side popped up a little bit. I just want to make sure I get it down there good. All right. And I'm going to go in and sew one more time. have it. So we're going to do the same thing with the other side. Okay, so the next thing is to put the strap on. So because I didn't have any swivel clasps that were large enough to get around these grommets, what I decided to do was to kind of come up with my own little connector. So we did those little 1 1/4 inch straps here, and we're just going to stick this through. Lift you up a little bit. And come up like this. Okay, do that on each side. Now the reason why we didn't put double-sided tape all the way to the end here is we're going to stick one of these straps in one end, and we're going to stick the other one in the other end. So an awl is a great thing here, which I need to find my awl. Okay. So your straps folded over 4 times, or you've got basically 2 spots because you have 4 layers here, right? So I'm just going to kind of stick my awl in here because I edge painted this, so I want to make sure I can, I've got space in here. Okay. Okay. So we're going to take one end, and here's, I know I put these on, but really the easiest thing is to take it out and stick one end up. One side of this. You may need your awl to kind of stick it, push it in. Okay, so taking this, and I'm pushing it up in there. Okay, and you want it up about, well, put it in about 1 inch. You can kind of see where it stops there. So now we're going to put this through, and we're going to put the other side up the other end. Okay. So you can see it real good right there where it is. So now we're going to put some rivets in here to hold it. And you obviously need some pretty long rivets. I think I used my 12 millimeter. Let me see here. Yeah. See how long these are? Because you're going through quite a bit of vinyl here. So I'm going to just kind of mark this where I want. I have my little top Tops and Bobbins rivet guide here, which is absolutely wonderful. If you don't have one, you need to get one because it measures it out exactly for you. And I'm going to put one right here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press or do my holes here. Rivets in. Put the backs in. And then we're going to go ahead and press those in, and we'll do the other side. I'm going to press these in just a minute. I'm going to back you up. And it is completed. So look at how, ooh, you can't see. This lining is like perfect in here. It is amazing at how nice and there you go. You can kind of see that. Fits perfectly. No wavy zipper. And just to kind of give you an idea on where it sits, see it's about just right under the arm. Plenty of space to put your arm in because of the dip here, but anyway. All right, so again, this is the Marichel Hobo by RLR Creations. I'm going to be linking it below. And really just a couple of changes with working with hair on hide. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and it gives you some inspiration to go ahead and maybe try a little. So until next time, happy sewing!